biscuit, you can tell by looking at it.
So our taste is influenced by smell, vision, and the sound of the food as we eat it. And additionally, touch receptors in the mouth and tongue tell us how crispy, crunchy, or pleasing the texture is. All of these signals put together inside of the brain make a decision about if we find the food pleasing or not. So the question you have to ask yourself is, what are they doing to the food? And why does it taste different? And if the food that we eat now isn't actually what it was before or what we think it is, what are they doing to our brains and senses to influence our taste of this new technology that we're eating? This new technology that they're developing and they're feeding to us. I've said it before. I've got a previous video. You guys have seen it. If you haven't, check it out. I would eat at a regular restaurant that I would normally visit. And the last time I ate there, the chicken tasted different. That's the best way I could describe it. Now, honestly, it kind of caught me off guard. And if I were to go back, I would make a conscious effort to try to identify the specific difference in the taste besides just saying that it tastes different. But with that being said, I really have zero interest in trying it out again. It's kind of turned me off from it. Now, granted, more than likely over the past 2 years or so, I've probably contracted and tested positive, or would have tested positive if I took the test. And people have said before that after being infected or affected by the virus, that they lost their sense of taste. That was probably one of the most, like, the worst parts about it, besides like a raging headache and being extremely tired, was the fact that they lost their sense of taste temporarily or prolonged, which there's like a long version that pretty much like you keep symptoms for a long period of time despite whether or not you're positive or not. But at the end of the day, I don't know if that may have some effect on how I taste food now, or how food tastes to me now. But for this food in particular to taste that much different after having it many times before, weeks and months before, I don't think it's related. I think that there are reasons why businesses and restaurants and grocery stores and anywhere that food is being sold or provided or prepared, there's going to be some change. There's going to be some deviation for the fact that ingredients aren't available like they once were, for the fact that we are in the middle of a global food crisis. And, you know, there are farming and fertilizer supply chain constraints that are going to change how companies do business. Plain and simple, it's business. But at the end of the day, I believe that there's strict rules around ingredients and listing ingredients and the safety of these ingredients, and USDA and FDA and their involvement and approval process for certain things. But I believe that there was maybe some leniency added, that, and don't quote me on this, but I believe there was some leniency added so that certain companies didn't have to fully disclose the changes to their food or their ingredients or anything if they were minor changes, so that we could continue on with the production and supply of food and help to eliminate or at least reduce and alleviate the possibility or extension of food shortages that we were seeing so much all over the place. But then it's kind of like, well, what changes are being made to these ingredients that don't have to be approved or even mentioned or noted on the packaging? And, you know, and then it's like, well, how far do some people take it until they get slapped on the wrist and say, oh, you can't do that, or you couldn't do that, or you shouldn't have done that. And then, you know, they apologize, they release a recall or press release, maybe pay a fine, pull some things off the shelves, but by then it's too late. We've already consumed it. But I'm also not convinced that part of what we consume, or at least what is offered to us and possibly provided to us, whether it be grocery stores, restaurants, or even some of the prescriptions that are being put out there, aren't having some sort of effect to change your perception of what you're eating, so that you think it's what it was once before, but it isn't quite that anymore. I'm not saying this is a Soylent Green situation, but I'm also not saying that we aren't going that direction one day, where that is a likely possibility. With some people, kind of like glamour, they're making that a glamorous lifestyle. So I don't even know if I want to call it a lifestyle, but as times get tough and people get desperate and companies want profits, and you don't want shortages to interfere with your ability to do business, do people push it too far? Do they push the envelope too far? Do they start offering up dishes and meat primarily to eat that isn't quite what you think it's going to be? And we're seeing advancements in technology. There's huge investments being made. Granted, Bill Gates bought up hundreds of thousands of acres of farmland, and he's spending millions and billions of dollars on farming. But the technology, the investments are being made in these areas to try to formulate a solution to food and this energy source that is not, it's renewable, but we're consuming it at a faster rate than it can be renewed. So there's going to be a lot of changes. I guess the big thing is, are we going to be made aware of what these changes are? Are we going to have the ability to consent to these changes? Or is it going to be one of those things where it's after the fact, they tell you that they've already made the change, and by then it's too late? And it's not just meat. It's not just chicken. It's not just beef. It's not just pork. They're doing it with vegetables. They're doing it with the some of these Impossible and Beyond products that aren't, they're soy-based or they're plant-based and things like that. And, what's going on? Now, granted, I know that there are still some folks out there, some companies, some restaurants that I've spoken to, and they've assured, hey, we still source our ingredients from our traditional suppliers and reliable sources. And honestly, these are the ones that I ask that I notice the food tastes normal. I notice it doesn't taste different. And I'm like, hey, what's going on? How's your supply chain looking? Are you still getting the same products that you were getting months ago, years ago? I can tell you probably just off the top of my head, at least 4 or 5 different restaurants that I can tell you, I know they've changed their suppliers. For what I normally eat when I go to these places, they've changed their suppliers, or their suppliers have changed what they're shipping them. And if I were to ask them, I could pretty much guarantee that they would either agree or they wouldn't know. But if they did know, I bet you that they would agree and say, yes, you're right. We were unable to get this company went out of business, or this farmer wasn't able to produce this crop, or the cattle, they had to sell off their cattle, so we weren't able to get the same amount of meat from them like we used to, or our overhead expenses and operational costs are increasing so much, and inflation's just killing us. Higher interest rates are killing us, so we had to find a less alternative option to save money, to save the business, to keep the doors open. And I can guarantee you, like, at least 4 or 5 off the top of my head. If you guys want to know, hit me up. I don't want to put it on the video. I don't want to call anybody out like that. But I bet you at least 4 or 5 would say they had to make some changes to their normal supply, their normal ingredients, for various different reasons.